So this is my third video. Sorry that it took forever to make, but I'm finally here. So I was going to do a continuation of the last video. So basically I'm going to tell you guys about the MCAT schedule that I made last summer when I was studying for the exam. I think anyone can use the tips in this video, not just people that are taking it at the end of the summer like I did, only because you can try to figure out how to plan your schedule and just some other things as well. But yeah, so here it goes. I took the Kaplan course when I was studying, and like I mentioned before, you don't have to take the course if you don't want to. I just took it so that it could kind of keep me more in check. And with the course, I got the set of Kaplan study books. You can get those without taking the course. You can get Princeton, Kaplan. Just look on Amazon for what you think is your best fit. But Kaplan gave 7 books that each had 12 chapters. And so the books were, one was biology, behavioral science, biochemistry, general chemistry, organic chemistry, physics and math, and critical analysis and rating section. And so my course started in June and ended at the end of July, but I wanted to study before the class even started. So what I did was, as soon as I got home from the school year, which was around May 20th, the third week of May, I started studying, and I made it a goal to finish the books before the class even begun. And so you'll understand later why that was my goal. Even though it seems like I was rushing things, it actually helped me in the end. So what I did was I did 3 sections a day for those 3 weeks before the class started, and I was able to finish the books. What the setup of the book is that after each chapter you have practice questions, and so that's how you can practice what you learn in each section. So like I said, for those 3 weeks I did all those 7 books. I did 3 books a day, 3 sections within a book a day, and even though it seems like that's not a lot, it still took a lot of time, because when I was doing each section I took handwritten notes just to make sure I retained the information, because that's the type of learner that I am. I'm more into active learning, and so by taking notes on the chapters and highlighting and everything, it helped me understand what I was learning better. So that's just a tip for you guys. If you're an active learner or something that helps you to maintain your focus, you could think about taking notes as you're reading each section. And then once I was done going through all of the books, I had the chance I decided to take a practice test, which was the full 7-hour length exam. And so that was my first practice test that I took, and to be honest, I was actually confident initially, because I thought, oh, I went through all these books, that means I have better knowledge than I did when I took my diagnostic, I should be fine. I was definitely wrong though. I didn't do that well on my first practice test, which may happen to a lot of you guys. If it doesn't, that's a good thing, but if it does, don't be upset about it. I did a little better than my diagnostic test, but I was far from my goal, so I had a lot to work on. But I was happy that I took that practice exam, because it helped me figure out which sections I was weaker in and what I should focus on. And so from that, I realized that I was weaker in physics and general chemistry, the CAR section, and actually the psychology and sociology section. So that's where I knew that I had to focus a lot of my time and energy on. So that was the first 3 weeks of my studying. Then the classes started within the first week of June, and I had classes twice a week, 3 hours each class. And so before going to each class, you had to read a certain amount of chapters from the books that were given. And in the class, you would go through those chapters with practice problems. And so because I already went through all of those books beforehand, I kind of had an advantage over the students that were in my class, because what I did was I still followed the schedule that the class provided, which was I read all of the chapters that I was supposed to before each class, but because I went through everything beforehand, I went through the chapters that I understood faster, so I didn't waste time on those chapters a second time around. And the ones that I didn't understand, I was a lot more thorough with them and made sure that I understood everything to the T. And so like I said, I knew which chapters I didn't understand based off of the results that I had from my first practice test. And so that's what a majority of my learning was for weeks, from June to July. It was going through this the schedule that the class made and going through all the chapters alongside the class, but I focused a lot more on the chapters that I had a difficulty with, and I sped through the chapters that I knew I would be fine in, just so that I didn't waste any time. And so what I did the second time around, when I went through those 7 books, I used Khan Academy as my supplementary material as well. So there was a lot of topics that I didn't understand, or that I wanted more information on to understand it better, such as glycolysis and the citric acid cycle from the biochemistry sections. So I used a lot of the Khan Academy videos to understand all of these topics. And so that's one thing that I want to point out to you guys, is that you should use Khan Academy. It's very useful. People praise it for a reason. I think it's a good source. It's free. So make sure to use Khan Academy, and taking notes while you're watching the videos is especially useful, because sometimes they don't go fast in the videos, but they give you a lot of information that it can get overwhelming. So in my opinion, when you're doing those videos, it's a good idea to take some notes on the key details, such as what the important molecules in the processes are, or important equations. So yeah, so that's what I did when I was studying the 7 books the second time around. I used Khan Academy. I I was basically more in depth with the parts that I struggled in, which included the physics, the general chemistry, cars, and psychology. And so then I started, and then when I was doing those, I decided to take a practice test around week 7, which was 4 weeks after taking my first practice test. I took a second practice test, and I saw that my score did improve. It wasn't too significantly, but the fact that it improved showed that I was finally getting a grasp of how to study of the material, and that my studying was actually effective. And so, like I said, I took a second practice test in week 7, and then from that point on, I decided I would do a practice test every other week until the second week of until the end of July. And so I think by the end of July, I did about 6 or 7 practice tests. And so that may seem like a lot, but honestly, by the time I was at the 4th practice test, doing the 7-hour exam was really easy for me. I woke up at 8 a.m., went through it, and doing all those practice tests was very helpful, because after each test I realized what I was still weak in and what I had improved in, and over the span of those exams I realized that I was improving in my weak spots. So that's something that I wanted to add on to as well, is just when you're studying, don't just study from the books, make sure you're still doing practice questions. So it's never too early to take a practice test, in my opinion. I think that the more you take is better for you, as I mentioned in last time's video, because you'll get a better handle of the layout of the exam. But not just that, you can, if you take more practice exams that are 7 hours long, it'll get you more prepared for the actual exam itself, in my opinion. And so it's something that I wanted to say, which is, try to incorporate a practice test once you're getting closer to the exam. I think you should do a practice test every week. And so that's what I did. Come August, I did 2 practice tests every week. So I did one Monday, one Friday. And by the time the exam came, I had done 11 practice tests. And so by the time August came, I was done going through the books a second time around. So all I had left was doing the practice test. And that was actually a good position for me, because it gave me the opportunity to go through the material that I was weaker in, and also with that extra time that I had, I used it to go through each practice test to see what I did right and wrong. And so that's the last thing that I want to mention that I'm going to expand a little bit on. When you're doing the practice tests, make sure that, so after you do the practice test, give yourself a break. Don't do anything, go for a walk, like don't keep studying after that 7-hour exam. Give yourself a break for the rest of the day. The following day, what you should do is go through the test and go through each question, no matter if you got it right or wrong, to see what you did, what the explanation on the exam is for the correct answer, to see if you got the correct answer based off of that explanation or if it was just luck or chance. And the reason this helps you is because you'll notice that after that, in some exams you will be making the same mistakes because you weren't paying attention to detail. But if you use the method of going through the practice test question by question the day after, you'll start to pick up on those mistakes, and then you'll keep note of them to make sure you don't do them for the next test. So when I was studying, the day after taking a practice test, I would get a piece of paper, go through each question of each section of the exam, and I would write down notes on topics that I didn't understand fully, write down notes on something that I needed to remember personally, which was, for example, like a formula that I needed to memorize that wouldn't be given on the exam. And so I think that's the best way to go through the practice test, is to write down notes as you're taking them so that you know what mistakes you've made and so that you don't repeat them. And a lot of the questions essentially repeat from exam to exam, and so that's why taking those notes helps you, because once you take those notes and you understand what you did wrong, you'll be more prepared for the next test. And you'll see by the 10th exam, if you're using this method of going through each exam and trying to figure out what mistakes you made, you'll definitely see improvement, because I know I did, and I know that just like logically speaking, if you look for the mistakes that you've made, you'll end up doing better. So that's the other tip that I wanted to give. So those are my 2 tips. It may seem like I gave a lot of information that was all over the place, but basically my tips were, when you're doing this, when you're doing the books, in my opinion, it's good to go through them twice, specifically the sections that you are weaker on. And when you go through them a second time, use the internet, use Khan Academy, use YouTube to try to understand topics that you didn't understand before, be it torque from physics or the Krebs cycle from biochemistry. It's good to use your outside sources and not just those books when you're studying. And then my second tip will be, make sure you do 12 practice tests, like 8 to 12 practice tests. And when you're doing those practice tests, you should go through each question, go through each section, and make sure you understood why you did what you did wrong. And if you got something correct, make sure you got it correct for the right reason and that it wasn't just chance. And I assure you that by the, again, 5th, 6th, 7th exam, you'll see a lot of improvement if you use this tip. So yeah, I think that's it in terms of my tips. I know that the schedule that I gave was kind of more of a general schedule, but that's just how it worked for me. From the end of May to the end of July, I went through the 7 books, and then in that time I also did practice exams. And then for all of August until my actual exam, I did only practice tests, and I reviewed those practice tests. And so I think that's a good way to study if you have 3 to 4 months for the exam. And even if you have a lot more time for the exam, I still think you can use these tips. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy this video, and hopefully the next video is up faster than this one. And don't forget to subscribe. I always forget to mention that in every video, but I'm also a noob to this. And the last thing I want to say is, if you guys have anything that you do want me to talk about, feel free to give me ideas, because eventually I'm going to run out of ideas, but I'm also making this for you guys. So if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me and I'll make a video on it. So I hope you're enjoying this summer, and I'll catch you guys soon. Bye!